we also do a lot of quantitative clinical studies, often with derms in their offices in clinic or at an external lab, but overseen by a dermatologist. We use a lot of equipment like Visias and corneometers and derm evaluation.
Hi, Skin Friend. Thanks so much for tuning in to this week's episode of The Skin Reel. This week, I'm really excited to have not a dermatologist, but someone who is really passionate about creating amazing skincare products. And that's Amy Gordinier. She's the founder of Skinfix, which, if you have not heard about it, it's an amazing skincare line. I love the products that they offer, and they really pair with dermatologists, and not just for the sake of creating another product because some ingredient is trending. They really come to dermatologists and ask us, what is a problem you're seeing in your patients or something that your patient's skin needs? And then once they have that issue or problem, they then work to create a formula to solve it. And not just using fabricated formula, off-the-shelf formula. They really look at and delve into each ingredient, wanting to make sure they're maximizing the active ingredients. And they really work closely with dermatologists to make sure that things are clinically proven to work and can not just make people's skin look and feel better, but actually heal their skin. People with eczema, acne, psoriasis, rosacea, what have you. So a really cool episode where I learned a ton about how products are regulated and maybe not regulated and what goes into creating a product, what's the deal with preservatives, and so much more. And I love the story of how she came to meet the great-great-granddaughter of a British pharmacist who had created this wonderful healing balm that had been passed down through generations. And she was able to get that formula, and it really was the heritage piece of the Skinfix line. And now it's been updated to today's standards, but it is really the flagship piece in Skinfix. So really awesome story there. And of course, anyone listening, this is not a sponsored podcast, and I have not been paid to endorse anything. But Skinfix is a company I believe in. I recommend it to my patients. And so I was really thrilled to be able to have this opportunity with Amy to discuss what goes into creating not just a beauty skincare line, but a clinically efficacious skincare line. Be sure to check it out. Amy, thank you so much for being here. I'm so thrilled that we have this opportunity, and I am so excited to learn about you and your wonderful business, Skinfix. And I've been a fan for a number of years. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Mina. It's an absolute honor to be on your podcast. So thank you for having me.
Yeah, well, so I introduced you briefly, but I would just love to hear in your own words the story of how you became a part of Skinfix, because it's a really cool story. So I'd love for you to share that.
Okay, well, I started my career out of university in beauty. I was lucky enough to get a job with L'Oreal and worked for L'Oreal and then Coty, and then moved to the UK and worked with Jo Malone for a number of years when she was still very much involved with her business. And then was pregnant with my first baby, so we moved back to my husband's hometown of Halifax, Nova Scotia. And I thought I definitely left beauty behind. But a few years into living here, met a woman that had an incredible healing balm formula that her great-great-grandfather had compounded in England in the 1870s. He had been a chemist and a pharmacist, and the family had been making this balm for decades, and they had emigrated to Canada. And when I first saw the balm, I was captivated because coming from the beauty industry, I was sort of used to seeing active ingredients kind of sprinkled in, and this product had 4 OTC, FDA-approved actives at very high levels, which was unheard of. But what I really was struck by was that over the decades the family had been making the product and selling it privately, they had amassed literally hundreds of letters from people that had used this balm to treat some pretty serious skin issues, eczema, psoriasis, diabetic foot ulcers, lichen sclerosis, and they had sort of found relief after trying many different things. And I thought, well, the idea of getting back into beauty, but doing something that I felt a little more passionately about, where we were actually healing skin and helping people, just really resonated with me. So I bought the business. And one of the first things I did was to take it to Toronto and talk to a dermatologist to say, I'm not an expert in skin concerns. What do you think of the formula and how should we go from here? So we started working with the dermatology community from the get-go over a decade ago.
Wow. Oh, what a cool story. I mean, you just happen to run into this lady and find out about this balm that they have been making for decades. That's so cool. What an incredible story. Okay. So Skinfix is the company that you are the owner or founder of, right? And you collaborate a lot with dermatologists, which I think is so critical, right? Like dermatologists, we don't know really anything about formulating products, right? Like we need help with chemists and people who have expertise in that. But I think when you pair people together, you can really make amazing products. So how do you work with dermatologists for your products?
We work in a number of ways. One of the most important things we do is really get a sense of where there's a need for an OTC topical product. So in speaking to our scientific advisory board and then other dermatologists, I attend a lot of derm conferences. I'll sort of understand where the needs are, especially when we first got started. There was a lot of feedback about, we really need a hand cream that's appropriate for people with eczema on their hands, or we really need a product for KP. So I take the lead in terms of development, but then I partner with dermatologists who are specialists in whatever concern that we're targeting to really understand both sort of what's available in terms of protocols to treat the concern. What are the sort of prescription topicals available? I kind of look at what the mode of action is in those. And then are there other ingredients that have clinical efficacy associated with treating the symptoms of this specific concern? In the case of our new eczema line, I worked really closely with Dr. Peter Leo, and he actually is very passionate about holistic remedies as well. So he took me through all the clinical research behind sunflower oil and indigo and chestnut oil and all sorts of things that he was seeing. And we were able to work together to really build the formula from the bottom up, making sure the body product had coconut oil to address the staph infection often associated with an eczematic wound. So really we work in tandem to build a formula from zero and make sure that everything in it is not only working towards healing the symptoms of that concern, but also isn't going to further irritate with something that could sensitize the skin. And third, can work as an adjunct with a prescription topical, because we also recognize that, an OTC is not always going to be the only thing that someone needs to use.
When you say OTC, just for people listening, that's over the counter, if you don't know. And yeah, Peter Leo, he's wonderful. He was actually on the podcast talking about more holistic ways to treat atopic dermatitis. So that's great that you're pulling in those resources all around. And of course, yeah, seeing where there's a need. I find there's so many products on the market nowadays. It's overwhelming. I mean, I get overwhelmed walking into a store and all these products and people are saying, oh, what about this? What do you think about this? I'm like, it's hard to keep up. So yeah, finding where there's a need and then making a product to fix that and to help it and to make it work alongside prescription medications if needed is crucial. And I also find a lot of people want products that smell good or that feel good. And sometimes that goes against what, as dermatologists, we recommend, because there are a lot of sensitizers or things that could make you break out and make you have an allergic reaction. So trying to find that balance is crucial. Have you found that difficult with formulating your products?
We are also considered a clean brand at Sephora. And I know that dermatologists aren't always huge fans of clean, but we have made the choice as a brand to be clean. However, our no list goes well beyond the clean list at Sephora because there is a whole host of ingredients that we will not use because of their potential to sensitize. So essential oils, things like tea tree oil, menthol, lavender, we don't use any oils, we don't use any fragrance. We avoid certain acids that can be particularly sensitizing, things like kojic acid. We've chosen not to work with, even though it can be very effective, it can also be highly sensitizing. Ingredients like urea at certain levels, while they can be effective, can also be sensitizing. So we're really particular about what we use and what we don't. And there are also a lot of synthetic ingredients that, to your point, create a beautiful texture to the product and maybe allow you to have sort of like a transparent, really gel-like formula, but they're not providing any benefit to the skin and they can potentially be damaging to the skin. So we avoid ingredients like that as well, things like pegs and acrylates that really aren't providing any purpose other than a visual, look to the product and a texture that isn't adding any value for the skin. So we're pretty particular about how we formulate. We have to be because we work with a dermatologist community and, you're the one seeing serious skin issues and understanding that you can't have a product that feels good if it doesn't actually do what it needs to do.
Or gives a rash, right?
Yeah, or creates another issue. I do sort of cringe when I see products focused on atopic dermatitis that have things like lavender, like a lot of the baby eczema products or tea tree oil.
I know. It hurts me. It's everywhere. It's hard to get away from that. And the fact that it's marketed for babies, it's a lot. So yeah, that's why I love when I hear that dermatologists are working with companies to help create products that are safe, effective for skin. Now, I do want to talk about clean beauty because sometimes I do want to roll my eyes when I hear this word because it seems like everyone's using it. What does it really mean? There isn't a defined definition of clean beauty and people use clean for everything now. Like, are you working out clean? Are you eating clean? Of course we want clean, right? I don't want dirty skincare, but what does clean mean to you?
Yeah, no, it's a really good point. I mean, for me, Sephora has recently really extended their list of no ingredients if you want to be designated as a clean as Sephora brand. So there are ingredients that, I know can be controversial. The science is not necessarily definitive, but there is potentially some concern either in, their ability to disrupt the endocrine system or are they obesogenics? Are they bad for the environment? And our philosophy is when in doubt, leave it out. If we are able to formulate something that is clinically effective and we put our products through the rigors of clinical trials with dermatologists, so we're held to a really high standard. And our feeling is if we are able to create something that delivers clinically, and it also happens to meet the clean list at Sephora, which is pretty strict, I feel really good about that. So is are parabens really causing breast cancer? Are they not? There's a lot of question marks, but we just have decided that if we are able to adequately preserve our products without parabens, we can use another preservative system that's incredibly effective. And we put our products also through a lot of micro testing, more than is required, because we're putting our products on compromised skin. We want to really make sure nothing's going to grow in that product. As long as we can do that and be clean and also be safe for sensitive skin, then we choose to do so. But that's more of a personal choice for me as a founder and a formulator. I understand in the end of the day that it is nebulous and there isn't really a defined protocol for what clean means generally. So within a Sephora environment, we sort of follow their guidelines, but I do understand the concerns among the dermatologist community and others.
Well, I think it's also just confusing for people too. It's nice to hear you say, okay, you all abide by the Sephora clean guidelines. And I also say, just to me, clean means being environmentally responsible and a company that treats their employees well and humanely and things that are, sourced ethically and stuff like that. So I know that's harder to gauge, but I also say if you really want clean beauty, also just don't use as many products. Like you don't need to be going through so much stuff and waste and all of that. Like that means clean to me as well, although I know that's my own version.
I love that. I mean, from a sustainability perspective, we're actually clean and planet aware at Sephora, and the planet aware requirements at Sephora became absolutely really, really strict this last year. I think we're one of 12 brands in the entire store that was able to achieve it. Really, really rigorous in terms of carbon footprint and supply chain. And our head of ops is just super dedicated to that. And I agree with you. It's a more holistic perspective on how we treat health and wellness of not only our skin and humans and the planet and how we treat each other, I do think that there is a sort of broader definition of clean that is worthwhile.
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to hear about some of the testing. You said that you all put the products through a lot of rigorous clinical testing, because this is another thing that can be a little bit nebulous, right? Someone can say, oh, it's dermatologist approved or clinically tested, but what does that really mean? So what does that mean as a founder for your company?
I mean, in terms of dermatologist approved, we use a third party called the Derm Review Panel. That is a third party blind panel of dermatologists that look at our ingredient listing without knowing what the brand is and vet it and then look at the product and give it sort of a stamp of approval from the perspective of not being sensitizing. We also do a lot of quantitative clinical studies, often with derms in their offices in clinic or at an external lab, but overseen by a dermatologist. We use a lot of equipment like Visias and corneometers and derm evaluation. We often are testing products on the specific skin concern that we're also trying to treat, which is also not done very often. For looking at a product for eczema, we're recruiting eczema patients. Rosacea, same thing. We did a product for rosacea and did a study with Dr. Zoe Dralos in her clinic in North Carolina, which ended up being published in the JDD. So we have 6 peer-reviewed published studies. We're just holding ourselves to a much higher standard in terms of rigor. In the industry at large, brands are often using consumer perception as their route to making claims, which is, we ask consumer perception questions at the end of studies as well. And typically that's where you're going to get the 90 and 100%. And we often have to use those claims in a Sephora environment because very transparently, that client just needs to see a big number when actually a statistically significant reduction in redness might be a 30% number, which is meaningful, but they don't necessarily understand that. So we also do consumer perception, but we absolutely always do quantitative clinicals in a very clinical setting overseen by a dermatologist. And that's how we test the products for efficacy.
Yeah, well, and I think that shows because dermatologists really do love Skinfix and we recommend it. And like, I'm not a fan of very expensive products. I'm not a fan of a lot of products. And I do get a lot of my products, if not most of them, from the drugstore because I just feel like it works and you don't have to spend a lot of money on products. But that's another thing that I like. Your products seem well priced, that people are not spending crazy amounts of money on a cream for their eyes or something like that too. So
we're in a Sephora environment. We're not, as inexpensive as a mass product, but if you also look at our formula costs, they are exponentially higher. We spend all of our money in the formula, not as much in the sort of bells and whistles and packaging that go around it. So we do put a lot of technology into the formulas and do try to make them as accessible as possible.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's really what matters, right? But I know when you're trying to sell a product, all the marketing seems to matter, right? And how it looks. You said public perception, right?
Yeah, it's hard to balance, especially being a planet-aware brand, and all of our packaging has to meet strict guidelines in terms of sustainability, and it's hard to strike that balance of having a product that feels luxurious, looks amazing, and is trendy, and has the trendy ingredients that are popping on SEO, and then also delivers against a very specific skin concern and sort of the high expectations of the dermatology community. So we're trying to balance everything.
Do you feel like, oh boy, now everything's hyaluronic acid or everything's niacinamide? Do you feel as a founder the pressure like, oh my gosh, now we got to come up with a product with this or that? Like, is that overwhelming at times?
Yes. Typically we're using a lot of ingredients in order to achieve a result that end up being ingredients that happen to also be trending at Sephora. So, or on, search on Google or on Amazon. And that is helpful because we also need those trending ingredients to capture the attention, but we don't develop based on that. A lot of brands will just develop based on what contract manufacturers are offering in terms of stock formulas, and they'll just pick products off the shelf and they'll maybe tweak it a little. We're really not. We're building products from the ground up for a specific purpose. So I do get frustrated at times when, all of the barrier products have hyaluronic acid and ceramides and that's it. And that's not, really going to do the job. We have skin similar lipids and all sorts of peptides that are helping to stimulate ceramide production in the skin, and filaggrin and aquaporin. But it's a big message. It's hard to get that across sometimes. Sometimes you just have to talk about hyaluronic acid and ceramide because that's what she's looking for.
Sometimes I'll go over people's products. They'll want to tell me what they're using or ask me. And I'll look, they have all these products for the same thing or with the same ingredient in it, but they just think, oh, I need to buy a separate hyaluronic acid serum because everyone's talking about it. I'm like, well, if you actually look at your moisturizer, it has that, or it has ceramides, it has nicotinamide. So a lot of the ingredients, these buzzwords we're hearing about, they're likely already in your products if you actually just look at them and look for the ingredients. So yeah, it is challenging. And same thing with like skincare and skin trends, trying to just convince people it's okay not to follow all those trends. It's okay to stick with what you're doing if it's working and you've got great skin. You don't have to just jump on every trend you see and buy every new product that comes across your feed. So I can imagine as a founder of a skincare company, that's very challenging for you all as well.
Yeah, and I was listening to your podcast and you were speaking to the fact that, I think you were talking to Amy Gordinier, but that a lot of times if you have multiple products that all have niacinamide, for instance, you may be getting too much niacinamide, and I think that's a really interesting point. We're very careful about putting the right level and not necessarily the most, and not necessarily putting the same actives in every single product in the line because of that very reason. And it's hard for clients to understand the nuance, but you don't want to overdo it with certain actives.
Yeah, more is not always better, right?
Yeah.
You had mentioned earlier about preservatives and parabens and, whether they cause problems or not, but that you all have chosen just to remove them. So what do you do? So, we have to have preservatives, right, in our products because we don't want mold and bacteria and things growing in them. So what do you all use as preservatives then?
So the preservative conversation is such a loaded conversation because we use an ingredient called phenoxyethanol. We use the EU limit, which is under 1%, and then we boost it with all sorts of antioxidants and other known preservative boosters. And we put our products through a lot of rigor in terms of microtesting because we just can't have anything growing if someone has an open eczema wound, or we just don't want to take any chances. And we have, there are groups like Yaka, which is one of these apps that is very popular with Gen Z, that vets products for clean, that does not like phenoxyethanol. So even though our product is absolutely, gold standard in terms of clean, because we use phenoxy, we get completely dinged on Yaka. And I would love to get a hold of them because the reality is we have tried a lot of natural preservative systems and they have failed micro. And we have had things growing, and we even had a production of 100,000 units of a wash that we had to dump because it failed micro at the finished goods stage. And mass manufacturing systems, which is where all of us are manufacturing, contract manufacturers, they have developed superbugs. They all have biofilm because they're cleaning their equipment over and over. And if they're over sanitizing, these bugs become superbugs. And don't want to instill fear, but you have to use a robust preservative system because otherwise you could have a lot of trouble. And so we have stuck with phenoxy and we will continue to use it until we are absolutely certain that there is something else that is quote unquote cleaner that is as effective. And it's really a point of passion for me because people demonize phenoxyethanol without understanding that and also some of these natural preservative systems are actually lactic acid, which can be very irritating to people as well. So there is no better preservative yet, in our opinion.
I feel like parabens were such an effective preservative and used for 100 years. And there really is no solid evidence that they are endocrine disruptors or cause breast cancer, things like that. But I can see no company wants to use them because the public opinion is so strong that they could, or they might, or they do. But I feel like there's going to be another preservative that's the next one on the chopping block. And maybe it's phenoxyethanol or another one, but it just seems like, you know, we've gone from a preservative that did work really well. Now people are trying to use other preservatives that either don't work as well, they cause rashes, or worse yet, right, is they allow bacteria and things to grow in the products, which is just absolutely not allowed at all. So yeah, it's a balance, right, of finding a product that people consider clean, but that is effective, because number one, it has to be effective, right? We cannot allow bacteria and mold growing in our products. So yeah, I can see, unfortunately, the public hears about one and they sort of run with it. And then, yeah, you're dinged on this app for using something that's totally safe. So I feel your pain. I've never heard of this app. What's it called?
It's called Yucca, Yuka. And, you know, they've just taken a perspective on phenoxy. And listen, if I could find something better, I would absolutely use it. And I will tell you, we go far beyond the micro testing that's required in the industry, far, far beyond. And not everyone does.
That's kind of scary.
We just will absolutely not use a preservative until we are convinced that it can kill anything that might be growing in a contract manufacturing environment or a manufacturing environment in general, or in a raw material. A lot of natural raw materials are natural materials that can grow things. So we test our raws, we test the bulk, we test post-production, and then we test a few weeks later. Like, we're just really, but yeah. Preservatives are touchy.
I hear you. That's not required for all companies to do that kind of testing.
No, we implement, because we have some products that are FDA and Health Canada regulated OTCs, which is, you know, confusing for people, but it means the product has a drug facts panel on the back and is considered a pharmaceutical drug. It has an active ingredient that's been FDA approved as a pharmaceutical active. And the manufacturing process for an OTC is much, much, much more rigorous than a cosmetic. And we implement that rigor with our cosmetic products, which is not required. So it's just part of our DNA, because we're a sort of therapeutic skin health brand. We've always been really rigorous about making sure our products are safe. I do think that safety is the new clean, if I'm honest. I almost think it's more important than quote unquote clean. It's critical.
That's number one, right? You want a safe product. You don't want a product that can hurt you, harm you. I feel like the focus needs to be on that, which we know if you put bacteria, mold on an open wound, you're going to have a big problem versus some maybe theoretical risk that hasn't really ever been panned out. Like we should focus more on the actual safety right then and there. So yeah, I agree with you on that. And a lot of these products, or most of these skincare products, are just considered cosmetics, right? So they really don't have to go through the rigors that your products do, or products that are drugs.
Yeah, very few people will embark on an OTC because it's much more expensive to develop, is the truth. I mean, it's about $100,000 of validation, and it takes many, many months longer. SPFs always have to be OTC. And so that's about the only OTC that most beauty brands will endeavor to do. I mean, you know, brands like Aveeno have OTC eczema products, etc. But we started as an OTC company, and we've sort of kept that as part of our DNA. And so, yeah, it's a very different process, and it's much more expensive. And you have to actually continue to validate the product every 3 months for 3 years. You have to put every production batch, you have to put a piece in the oven at 45 degrees and check it every 3 months for 3 years to make sure that the active is still active and it is homogeneous and the formula is evenly distributed. So it's a lot that we go through.
Well, and I've heard too, when people are thinking of starting a skincare line, right? Sunscreen's usually the last thing they do because of the rigorous, that being OTC and the requirements for that versus a moisturizer or something else. So yeah, this is super eye-opening, even for me, right? Being in the skin health world, just learning all of this, it's amazing. And yeah, most people have no idea about what goes into making a product and the requirements or lack of requirements. So I would love, and I don't know if you're going to tell me, what is in this healing balm that the woman you met was the family recipe? Like, what is in this magic healing balm?
The original balm is sadly been retired from our line. We reintroduced, Dr. Leo and I developed a new product to replace it, only because, quite honestly, just the technology available in ingredients for itch and inflammation and infection were just so great that we needed to bring this balm from 1870 into the modern world. And it was also a little bit, goopy. So it was an acquired taste, whereas this is something you can use on your face. It's ophthalmologist tested. It's a beautiful texture. So we have retired it. However, it had 4 incredible actives in it to treat like wound healing and eczema. So it had colloidal oatmeal, but also had zinc at a very high level, which is, I think, what really helped to initially calm that irritation and inflammation. It had allantoin, which is derived of the comfrey root. It's a derivative of urea. It's a uric acid derivative, but it's an OTC monographed ingredient for wound healing. It's keratolytic, so it helps to exfoliate it. It's also a humectant, so it pulls water into the skin. We love allantoin. We use it in a lot of things. And it had sweet almond oil, which is actually monographed in Canada by Health Canada for anti-itch. It's an antipyretic in Canada. It's an actual monographed FDA-approved ingredient. So it was a powerhouse. And just, again, it's the combination of ingredients. I mean, you'll understand this, but there's never going to be one ingredient that kind of does everything. And a lot of times eczema products have colloidal oatmeal because it allows the company to make the eczema or eczema prone claim. And then the rest of the formula is like whatever, emollients. But it's so much more than that. The colloidal oatmeal is really important, but the zinc is incredibly critical to tackle the inflammation. The itch is really, a specific issue related to eczema. The wound often associated with an eczematic concern. So we look at everything holistically. We talk to the experts in skin concerns and say, what's going on and what do we need to think about? And, when I'm thinking about an emollient oil to use, maybe I'll choose a sunflower because it has clinical efficacy at upregulating ceramides. And maybe I'll choose a coconut because it's an antibacterial and it could help with the staph infection associated. So we're really dissecting every ingredient rather than just saying, give me a 1% colloidal oatmeal and call it a day. It's a very different process. So yeah, the original balm kind of set the whole thing in motion.
Yeah, I mean, after 100 years or so, it's okay to reimagine it and reinvent it for sure for today's taste. Amy, I would love to know what you do for your skincare routine.
Not enough. I shop and change a lot. It was funny. I was listening to you talk about retinol, and I have not, believe it or not, at 54, done it yet. I know, because I start and then I just have an issue with it. But I have really dry, sensitive skin. But I really do need to go all in with the retinol. But I was raised by a mother who was just like cleanse, moisturize, sunscreen every day from a very early age, which was great. She was raised by a mother that was all about skincare. So, I do make sure that I cleanse my skin, especially at night. I make sure my SPF gets removed and all of my makeup and anything that from the day, and moisturize. I do love peptides. So instead of retinol, I use a lot of peptides and growth factor and things that are helping to stimulate that collagen. I love vitamin C, but I'm also prone to melasma and hyperpigmentation. So I really, really love vitamin C. And I use a lot of emollients because I have very dry skin. So I layer a lot of things at night. I go to bed with a mask of a lot of different things on my skin. I also love lactic acid. For me, it's a gentle exfoliating acid, so that's how I exfoliate. I'm very sensitive to salicylic. We use it in our products, some of our products, but I can't use them. It flares my rosacea, so I avoid salicylic, and I like things like lactic and glycolic and mandelic. So I love acids, love vitamin C, and love hydration. And I am going to take the plunge into retinol. We have a great adapalene retinol product that I'm going to try tonight. I'm going to do it again.
There you go. Yes. Start slow. I don't use it every night. I used to be able to, but I can't anymore. So, go slowly. You can also sandwich it with a moisturizer, then your retinol, and then more moisturizer. So there are ways to make it less irritating. So I would give it another try, but I love your skincare routine. That sounds perfect.
Okay, good. And sunscreen.
I knew you were obviously going to mention that too. Yes. Yeah. And it can be really simple, like your mom who raised you, right? Like cleanse, moisturize, sunscreen. That really is like the foundation for healthy skin. And all these other things are just extras if you need them, if your skin needs them, or you're at that stage of your life. So, Amy, this has been a lot of fun. I have learned a ton about this whole world of skincare products and formulations that really is just this like gray area for so many people. This has been great. If you could just share with our listeners maybe like your top 3 takeaways from today.
Well, I think one is, really make sure your product is well preserved. Don't be afraid of preservatives. I think especially if you're dealing with a compromised skin issue, safety is far and away the most important. I would say, I think if you understand the products you're purchasing and you have an understanding of their sort of formulation methodology and what they believe and how they formulate, I think it's really important because there are brands that are very much marketing machines, but they're not really that focused on what it is that they're making. I think it's really important. And I would say dermatologists are the skin experts. They truly are the skin experts. And listen to your dermatologist. There's a lot of them now on podcasts and social media, and we have access to so much great information, but you're the ones that have studied skin for a long time and work with patients every day. And so it's one of the reasons why it's been so important to our line to work closely with the experts. But I think any skincare company that recognizes the value of dermatologist input is, I think, important.
Of course, I'm going to agree with that, right? Which is why I'm out here doing this podcast. But I love that. Skinfix is a great product, and I know people are going to want to learn more about it. Where can they find more information about what you're up to and Skinfix?
We are on all the social platforms. So we're Skinfix on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn. Our website is skinfixinc.com. So please give us a follow, and hopefully we'll provide some good information from dermatologists and experts to help you on your skin journey.
Yes, wonderful. I will include all that in the show notes, and it's been a lot of fun chatting, and I'll see everyone next week.